Hey, ladies and gents, welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, where we talk about video games and everything happening in the industry. Episode 208. I am your host, Jerrad Wyche. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Dominic Orlando.
Just another normal week without really weird, crazy news in the world.
Yeah, just completely normal. No, I mean, we don't have the blockbuster news of, one game developer slash publisher kind of encompassing another one, but we do have some weird stuff to talk about this week. I didn't expect that this week's news would include Spider-Man news unrelated to Miles Morales. Well, I guess tangentially it's related. Anyways, we'll get to that later. If you haven't been paying attention to the internet, there was some changes to the remastered version of Marvel Spider-Man on PlayStation 5. But before we get to that, we have plenty of gaming news to talk about, some quickie news stories. Then we'll get to that big topic regarding Spider-Man. And then we have our second chapter of our Tell Me Why video game book club. We're going to be going over chapter 2, the second of the 3 chapters. Some really cool revelations in this chapter. But we'll get to that a little bit later on. First up, it was announced, we heard about EA Play coming to Xbox Game Pass. Wasn't sure when it was actually going to be implemented. And we have a date. So on the launch of the Xbox Series X and Series S, which is 11/10, November 10th, it's coming to console for Xbox Game Pass, and it'll be coming to PC in December. So that's really cool. I'm wondering if this was the plan all along, Dom. If they're like, hey, yeah, let's try to at least hit launch of next gen. Is that what you think the plan was?
Yeah, probably. And it's always good to Microsoft's doing a great job at strategically spreading out in how they release information, because one blog post or whatever it was saying EA Play coming to Game Pass, that's big news, that's great, it gets people's attention. And then separately, a week later, whatever it was, here's the date where it's coming, another thing that gets people's eyes on them. So it's pretty smart marketing strategy, I think.
Yeah, and I wonder if we're going to see a difference in strategy there, where Xbox, from the point of pre-orders going live up until the release, they're going to drip feed this news out right over weeks and days. Mm-hmm. So it's a constant thing of Xbox being in the news for months, at least 2 months. And PlayStation, are they going to do a last second blitz where 2 weeks out from the launch, that's when they just hit people with everything? Because it is strange that what are we now? A month and some change away from the PlayStation 5, and we don't even know what the UI on the console looks like, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. We've been kind of assuming they're going to drop a video, kind of walking through some of the features, and haven't seen it yet. It would be kind of nice to see some of that stuff now, guys.
Yeah. I mean, there is a reality in which they don't drop that stuff until the launch day of the console, but I don't know why they would do that.
I can't imagine. That just seems crazy, but whatever. Who knows with them anymore?
We'll see. Yeah, and it's strange. It's one of those things, obviously, the conspiracy theorists are out there well, is PlayStation in a place now where they just hold announcements because it's partly, A, they're not sure of the final form of whatever the announcement's going to be, and secondly, it might not be the best news, so therefore they hold off to the last possible moment. Kind of like what we saw with Miles Morales coming to PS4 and Horizon and all that stuff, They really were kind of vague on that stuff up until they had to reveal that information, So we'll see what happens. Once again, I don't necessarily prescribe to that notion. That's kind of a very pessimistic view of PlayStation, but who knows. Next up, Xbox Hall of Fame. This is something really cool that I hope PlayStation does. I don't know if you saw this over the week, Dom, but Xbox announced this Hall of Fame program, and basically it's a contest where they're going to select 8 entrants from each participating country, and they're going to get entered into the first class for the Xbox Hall of Fame. Now, there's multiple ways to be able to get inducted. It's partially based on your lifetime legacy as an Xbox user, and partially as these current events you can do of playing X amount of Game Pass games, getting X amount of achievements, gamer score, yada, 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 right? So I entered it, and the cool thing too is if you enter, not only are you eligible to be in the first Hall of Fame class for Xbox, a bunch of people are going to be winning a year subscription to Xbox Game Pass. So even if you don't get into the Hall of Fame, you still can get a really good reward, which is, $100 value. Well, actually, it's Game Pass Ultimate, so it'd be $150 value. No, that's not right. It'd be $174 value. Yeah. It's really cool. I'm interested to see if I have a chance of winning. I have a 150,000 gamer score, which is pretty high. And you may be wondering, how do us John Smiths of the world have a chance when there's these record setters and Twitch streamers that have all these crazy things with Xbox. Well, it turns out a lot of those people were already gifted a membership into the Xbox Hall of Fame. So if you're familiar with the likes of Ray Stallion 83, who has the highest gamer score ever, he was the first to hit 1,000,000 gamer score. He got inducted in. Ray from Achievement Hunter, who's now a solo streamer, aka Brown Man, got inducted in. Macca's Guides, who's one of the most popular achievement trophy hunters on YouTube, he got inducted in, which is really cool. I think it's an awesome program where you kind of reward the people who are most dedicated to your platform. And I would love to see PlayStation do something similar too. And I wonder, because they're saying this is the first class, Dom, it'd be really cool if this was like an annual or biannual event. And then this could be part of EXO when that comes back, right? As part of that whole community event that they have, EXO 21 or whatever it's going to be, they can have the Hall of Fame class there or announce the new Hall of Fame class. I think that'd be really cool. In general, what do you think of this Hall of Fame program? Is it something you hope maybe PlayStation does for their community? And in general, do you think this is a smart idea by Xbox?
Yeah, I think it's fun. Like, it's a cool thing. Yeah, that'd be cool if PlayStation did something like that too. I mean, they're similar systems, like achievements versus trophies. Like, it's, like kind of have that same thing going about them, where it's like you're keeping score across all the games you play on that platform, and getting awards and so on. So like, it makes sense. Like, they're trying to drive that kind of competition and get people into it. To make it official is pretty cool, right? Because right now, like, you can already go on like PSN profiles, and I'm sure there's equivalent for achievements. Like those other websites that kind of do that and rank people based on different metrics and that kind of stuff. So for Xbox to make like an official Hall of Fame thing is pretty sweet. One thing, like, we haven't talked about it in a while, like, that I wish both of them would do more is, and Sony kind of does this, but it doesn't always work, is like actual rewards for your achievements and trophies. Some like I give away like themes sometimes. Like, I got a Bloodborne theme when I got that platinum trophy, for example.
Yeah.
But maybe like, yeah, you get so many platinums or you get so much gamer score that like you get some kind of avatars, or you not necessarily like credit, like monetary rewards, but like something cool to acknowledge that. That's kind of more what I'm into. I think that'd be cooler. But yeah, the Hall of Fame stuff is really fun.
Well, and to your point, so Xbox's UI is similar, but it's updated, right? Obviously. And I think that they could play around with themes for that, which could be a reward for achievements. But also, Xbox has like their Pixar-style avatars now. Do you remember when they released these? Mm-hmm. They could have items in there too that you unlock. I do think there needs to be a way in which gamers get rewarded more for committing to trophies and achievements. And
yeah.
I will say PlayStation does a better job of it, but even then, I think it's like, bare minimum in terms of
right.
fulfilling it. But yeah, it's one of those things of like, do they put in the resources for something that is a very niche group of people that play the platform generally, and you have to kind of weigh the cost balance of that. And I mean, in my opinion, I think a lot of times the people who are hardcore into trophies and achievements tend to be the biggest word of mouth marketers for your systems, right? Because they're so into it that they'll sell other people on it. So I do think there's an avenue there to reward those people. But I thought that was so cool. If for some reason I do end up making it, and oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, not only do you get inducted into it, you get like a very limited edition jacket with your gamer tag on the back. It's like, it looked like a leather jacket, or maybe like a Letterman's jacket.
That's pretty sweet.
You get like a crystal award that says like, Hall of Fame class, and then your gamer tag and your name, which is really cool. And then you obviously get some Game Pass as well. So really cool program. Interested to see what happens there. The cutoff for it is October 19th, I believe. So if you're interested in this, just Google Xbox Hall of Fame and you can register. It's by simply logging into your Microsoft account. It'll do all of it on the back end. You don't have to worry about entering information. That's really cool. Next up, Xbox Series X hands-on early previews are live. Now, these outlets have kind of been mandated to talk about specific things, and this is part of Xbox's drip feed strategy, Dom, that we talked about, where they're letting people talk about a specific set of things, and then I assume that'll unlock more things up until the release of the console itself. I also want to preface that these are not reviews. These are previews, so Xbox even stated these aren't technically the final builds of the consoles, right? These aren't the retail versions of them, but for all intents and purposes, they practically are. I think it's more of a semantics legal thing there. Anyways, they were able to share so far their opinions and experiences with Quick Resume and backwards compatibility. And one thing to preface here as well is that the titles that they were trying out, all of these different outlets, aren't optimized for the velocity architecture. So a lot of the jumps in graphical fidelity and performance you're seeing are just the system itself working naturally, right? So there's a difference between the velocity architecture just taking the backwards compatible stuff or even the local titles and boosting them, as opposed to the developers going in and optimizing it for the architecture itself. But so far, generally positive reception. Most people are saying that quick resume is really cool, and also that the backwards compatibility works just like you'd expect from Xbox, that they've proven over the last couple of years. And the last thing too is that people like Jeff Grubb did tests with drive transfers, right? So going from the Seagate external hard drive to the internal SSD, and then from non-SSD hard drives that are external to the internal SSD, as well as external hard drives to the expansion Seagate card as well. And it's really impressive. I don't know if you had a chance to check these out, Dom, but in the worst case, these games are transferring between the internal and outside sources like in 10 minutes at most. Most of them are like 4 minutes. So that leads, the reason I want to talk about this is we had the news that you're going to have about 800 gigabytes active for the Xbox Series X, right? Comes with a terabyte, but 200 of it, essentially, I think it's like 198 actually, is going to be reserved for UI and quick resume and all of this other stuff. Because these transfer speeds are so fast, are we maybe overblowing the memory here of needing to get an expansion card? Or because if it transfers like that, I have a 6 terabyte external hard drive that's not SSD, and even those transfer speeds are crazy. So I can put everything on there and then just transfer my active games, right?
I mean, you already know my answer to this question, because I had already been saying that we are overblowing it, and I've already, and like that's just me and the way I maintain storage and stuff. But yeah, I think this is another cool feature that's gonna what do I want to say, remedy or like alleviate, some of the pain caused by having a smaller SSD. That the ability, because a lot of people are going to be bringing over their external storage drives that they had been using this generation, right? And plugging that in and using this feature a lot, and the fact that it's actually worthwhile, it's going to be significantly faster than downloading from the servers. Like I think most PS4 games probably take like half an hour or 40 minutes or so to download straight from the server. So like if PlayStation can get similar speeds of like, now it only takes 10 minutes to move from your external drive and so on, like to the main drive, then that's much better. Right. So yeah, this is a really cool feature, and hopefully PlayStation 5 does a similar thing at the same speed, because that's pretty cool.
And the other thing we have to clarify too is that Xbox has been very good with cloud saves, right? And the ability for those you'd be able to access your saves from anywhere. We're still unclear of how cloud saving is going to work with PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5. There's some weird stuff going on with Yakuza Like a Dragon.
I think it's clear that it's not going to work consistently.
Yeah.
I got to think that they just they haven't made it as easy on the developers as Xbox has, apparently.
And another thing too, you mentioned that people are going to be bringing their externals from current gen and next gen. Keep in mind that you want to have an external that also has a good transfer speed to it, right? So maybe your current external has the fast transfer speed, which is good. But if you want to, you can obviously get a new external that has better transfer speeds for much cheaper than what the expansion options are going to be for both the Xbox Series X and PS5.
That's a good point. Not every hard drive is equal, right? Some are faster than others and so on.
So just keep that in mind. And yeah, I do think there is a conversation there of us overblowing the need for these expansions because we can utilize the transfer speeds. And correct me if I'm wrong, transferring a game from an external to your internal, if you have like a bandwidth cap, that wouldn't affect it, right? Because you're just transferring memory at that point. You're not actually downloading something.
I mean, no, when you're going back and forth, no. But you would have had to initially download it.
Yeah, for sure.
At all. But if you're like constantly like swapping back and forth, which just seems weird to me, but as a use case. But yeah, that would, you're still local. So yeah.
Yeah. Just for people with data caps, because I think it would be easier for them to strategize downloading that stuff without hitting your data cap eventually getting everything into your big external, right? And then knowing like, oh, if I transfer stuff, it's not going to go against my data cap, right? So
One thing I wondered, maybe they've tested this, like, say you have your external plugged in your Xbox One right now, right? Can you like plug that right into a Series X and then you're good to go, or do they have to like re-download and reformat those files or something like that?
good question. I don't know if anybody's tested that or not.
'Cause that'd be cool if you could just literally plug it right into the new one and like your data's right there. That'd be sweet.
Yeah, my assumption would be that it doesn't have to reformat because a lot of that stuff is the same on the back end, right? But who knows?
Yeah.
A good question though. Maybe we'll see that in the next round of like previews. Maybe somebody got that question after this first wave, right, and figured it out. It is a good question though. Next up, we have a couple of releases this week, Dom. So we're gonna do our usual review roundup. The two games in question are Star Wars Squadrons and Crash 4 It's About Time. First up, Crash 4 It's About Time is currently sitting at an 80.
I didn't even know that this game came out this week. I had no idea that there was a Crash 4. I think I must have heard about it, but this was like, whoa, it's already out. Okay.
Yeah, I'm excited, especially with these reviews. So it's currently sitting at an 85 on Metacritic. Chris Carter of Destructoid gave it a 90 and said, quote, I sincerely hope that Activision entrusts Toys for Bob and Vicarious Visions with the keys to the Crash Kingdom from here on out, end quote. Toys for Bob are the developers of It's About Time, and Vicarious Visions are the studio that handled the remake of the trilogy, the Insane Trilogy. So he has a point there. They've done tremendous work. And, you know, Activision has kind of been scummy as of late, so it's really cool to see all these remasters paying off for them. Next up, Jonathan Dornbush of IGN gave it an 80 and said, quote, Crash Bandicoot 4 is a great return to form with some new ideas that add a fresh spin to Crash's classic gameplay, unquote. So, not as high, given an 80 as opposed to 90. Still, 80 is a great review score, especially for a new Crash title. Yeah. I am certainly surprised it's at an 85 on Metacritic. If you told me to guess what it would be, I would have assumed anywhere between like a 75 to an 82. So 85 is actually kind of high. Gets me excited though. I'm really cool. I'm really cool. It's really cool to see that it's reviewing this well because I was excited, but I wasn't sure. It's the thing with the fall games. I'm like, am I going to wait for this game? Am I going to wait for sale? Am I going to pick it up right away? And honestly, I don't know if this is a game that I want to play it immediately, and I wouldn't mind buying it. But I'd rather just wait to buy it and play it naturally on the next gen system, even if it's through backwards compatibility, just for those automatic enhancements, right? Because we're gonna be it's a month and a week from Xbox, so might as well just wait. For me, anyways. Next up, Star Wars Squadrons. This bad boy is currently sitting at an 81 on Metacritic, so still pretty good. A lot of reviews are currently in progress because this is very much focused on the multiplayer aspect of the game, right? So I think a lot of people still want to get some experience with the community once they get their hands on it and see how it plays with the larger player base. Andrew Reiner of Game Informer gave it an 83 and said Squadron's single player may fizzle out frequently like a malfunctioning hyperdrive motivator, but the multiplayer continually impresses and is worth the price of entry alone. So some not too kind words for the single player aspect of it, but apparently the multiplayer is really great. So that's good to hear. Next up, Wes Fenlon of PC Gamer. His review is in progress, so no actual score on it. But he said, quote, Star Wars Squadron succeeds where it's most important. It's a thrill to pilot these ships a hair's breadth above the surface of a Star Destroyer and through stunning nebulae and war wreckage more vivid than I could ever possibly imagine playing TIE Fighter in the late 1990s. The campaign, which took me about 10 hours to complete on the default difficulty, never really surprises, but it does manage to accomplish something noteworthy. This feels like being in Star Wars in a way no game has in a long, long time. Unquote.
Man, I am so pumped on this right now, but it's also a weird thing because I read a couple reviews today, and one thing they all seem to have in common is that this game is enhanced greatly when played in VR.
Yeah.
So I'm like to myself, oh, I want to play this so bad, and as good as the reviews are, apparently they're all even better when played in VR. So I think I'm gonna hold off until I actually have a VR unit to play this game because that sounds incredible.
As Michael Huber from Easy Allies would say, if you're not playing this in VR, it's compromised.
There you go.
Yeah. Seems like the way to play this game, the true way, is through VR. And it could be that system seller for a lot of people, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. I love his last line here, Wes Fenlon, when he says, "This feels like being in Star Wars in a way no game has in a long, long time," and that
Mm-hmm.
is probably the VR, right? Feeling like you're in those ships in that cockpit, which is really cool.
Man,
Um,
one thing I picked up from a review, I can't remember whose it was, but basically saying that when you're in a TIE fighter, from that perspective of first person, you realize this is just the most horribly architected ship ever because it's just a circle with a little window. You have no peripheral vision, whereas most of your X-Wings and stuff, you have your windshield is like all around you and your head can see in all directions.
That's funny.
Like you kind of like when it gets too realistic, it kind of like breaks the immersion or, breaks like some of the things that are stupid about the universe in that case.
I've never been a flight guy, so I have zero interest in this game. It sounds cool though. Like if I ever have a chance, if a buddy of mine has VR and he has this game, I definitely want to try it out. I've never been about flight games, man. Just not my thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it. 2 really cool review roundups for Crash 4 It's About Time and Star Wars Squadrons. One reviewing higher than I thought, and one reviewing maybe a little bit lower than I thought. I assumed Squadrons was going to be in the mid 80s, but once again, a lot of those reviews are in progress, and from a lot of this stuff too, the single player isn't that great, so that probably weighed it down. I'm assuming if it was just a multiplayer experience with VR, it might have gotten much higher. It could be that the single player is weighing it down, opposite of what Doom 2016 had. Remember where the single player was incredible, but the multiplayer was so bad it weighed down a lot of those reviews. It might be the opposite effect here. Real quick before we hop into the big topic, we have some required reading this week. Jason Schreier, the brilliant Jason Schreier over at Bloomberg now, which is still weird to say. He had a piece titled Cyberpunk 2077 Publisher Orders 6-day weeks ahead of launch. It's a really fascinating article talking about how CD Projekt Red is, leaning into crunch to get this game out in time in November. And it kind of directly goes against what the head of the studio told Jason Schreier last year, where he kind of promised to him that they wouldn't be doing crunch because they've planned accordingly to make sure that wouldn't happen. So it's kind of spitting in the face of that. And it's a very interesting topic right now because we talk about crunch in the industry and how people need to unionize and all of this stuff, but at the same time, crunch is a natural part of a lot of industries. And at what point is it a healthy form of crunch and an unhealthy form of crunch? And if employees are being able to choose whether or not if it's voluntary and they're getting paid accordingly for their extra efforts, like where's the line there? You know what I mean? It isn't a black and white conversation. There definitely is a lot of gray there.
Yeah. And also, like, there's each case is even a little different, right? So
Yeah.
at least in this case, there are pretty strict labor laws in Poland.
Yeah.
Poland, where, legally the salaried employees have to earn time and a half on overtime. And there are a few other rules are like about that, around that I don't think we even have that here in the US. So that's good. And then additionally, they get, at least at that studio, they get a really good bonus based on the game sales. It's like some percentage, of the sales goes back to the team. So like at least all this extra work, they're being compensated proportionally, at least. That's not to say that that's an okay thing. But like that's a different case than some of the other, stuff we heard about, like maybe Naughty Dog or some other studios, where maybe it's a little bit different. So.
And I do think we also have to put into perspective that we're 2 Americans talking about this, and American culture in general, we tend to put a huge strain on the productivity we have, right? And work in general. And we kind of validate that by saying, money equals more work, so therefore more work is fine. And to other countries, that might not be the case. You know what I mean? So hearing that they do get time and a half, which sounds good from an American perspective, like, well, at least they're getting paid more for it. That might not gel well with people from other cultures. So just something to think about as well. Like I said, not black and white, a lot of gray area there, but definitely read Jason Schreier's article. As always, his stuff is must read. Let's get into this Spider-Man stuff, Dom. So Marvel's Spider-Man face change. This is from multiple sources via the Insomniac blog, PlayStation blog, as well as Twitter. This week saw the reveal of a new in-game character model for Peter Parker and Marvel's Spider-Man for the remaster coming to the PlayStation 5. The reason for this change, according to Insomniac, was to find a better facial animation match for voice performer Yuri Lowenthal's facial capture performance. According to the developers, the change in fidelity and performance on the PS5 needed to be met with a closer match. Fans are divided on the change, as most saw it as unnecessary, and the line was drawn in the sand as to whether you prefer the original, which many poked at as a knockoff Andrew Garfield, or the new model, which many are pointing at as a knockoff Tom Holland. Brian Intihar, the creative director of Marvel's Spider-Man, had this to say via a post he made on Twitter regarding the change. A few words from me on today's news. Today's news about the new Peter Parker face model has surprised some of you, and we at Insomniac totally understand your reaction. Heck, it even took me a while to get used to Peter's new look. But as we discussed the franchise's future and moving to the PS5, it quickly became apparent that delivering even more believable-looking characters made finding a better facial match for actor Yuri Lowenthal, who we all love as Peter, a necessity. We care as much about this character as your attachment to him, so please know we didn't make this decision change lightly. As we did throughout the development of Marvel's Spider-Man, we will continue to read your comments, listen, and always be looking for ways to improve every facet of the game. At the same time, I hope you can trust us that this decision is what we feel was best for the future of the franchise and our upcoming goals for the beloved Marvel character. Now, with all of that being said, Dom, what are your impressions of all of this happening?
Initially it's weird. You're like, why the heck would they do that? And then the explanation they give is like, okay, that makes sense. Like, moving to the new system, like it's the shape of the face is detailed and the technology is detailed enough to where like that can make a bigger difference, make it look more realistic. It's so kind of surprising that they went through all the trouble though to go back and get a whole new model to do this. But whatever. I'm kind of on the side of like, I like the old look. If they're saying that like it's going to be more realistic with the new model, like that's great, like that's cool. But like as far as appearance, and I felt like the older one, the initial actor or model fit better, just because this Spider-Man is like in his like mid-20s or something, I want to say, whereas MCU Spider-Man is still in high school, right? So like it makes sense that he looks a little younger, even though Tom Holland is like I think older than me. I don't know, but yeah. But either way, I'm not.
For the record, Tom Holland is like 22, 23.
Never mind, he's a little bit younger than me still.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, that was like, to me, I'm like, yeah, whatever. I mean, whatever they think is best, like, I trust them, right?
Yeah. So, especially as somebody who's really into the comics, a lot of people who are into Spider-Man have their own idea of what Spider-Man should look like and have their preferences, right? For me, I've always been a fan of the more babyface Peter Parker. That's just always who I've pictured. So this, to me, leans more towards Peter. That's why I've always thought Tom Holland was the best casting for it, as opposed to Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield. There's some rumbling as to why people think outside of this, why this is happening. One, in terms of marketing and likeness. If your Spider-Man in your video game maybe doesn't look directly like Tom Holland, but is familiar to people who have seen Spider-Man, that can definitely help with sales, right? So that's one thing. Obviously, none of this is confirmed. This is just people talking speculation. The other one is people think that maybe this has to do with the Spider-Man coming to Marvel's Avengers, right? And there might be something there as well. Who knows? To me, I wholly believe them that it is probably to have a better face match with Yuri Lowenthal. If you look at Yuri Lowenthal and you look at this new actor, they don't look directly similar, but their face shapes are very similar and their mouth shapes are very similar. So that makes sense. And to the other point, people are like, oh, Peter Parker now looks like he's 15 or whatever. I have friends who are 28 and 29 who look as young as this new Peter Parker model does. You know what I mean? Some people just have a serious case of baby face. And I people are like, oh, he looks 12. He looks younger than Miles. And I don't know if it's that hyperbolic. I will give people the fact that he does look younger than the other model. But I have plenty of friends who have this type of baby face. I wonder, though, Dom, do you think this is the only character change we see? Because if they're willing to do this for the main character of the game, we've already seen Miles get a redesign, remember? He looks completely different than the original Spider-Man as well. I wonder if it's just them trying to... They know that this is going to be one of the pillars of PS5, right? And if they want to hit those performance targets, maybe they felt like, okay, if we're going to start anywhere, let's just wipe the slate clean here and get the best facial models we can for these characters. Like, do you think we'll see Mary Jane change, or maybe even like Norman Osborn?
Do you mean in the remaster or in...
Yeah, in the remaster, because this is for the remaster.
I mean, I guess it's possible that... I want to say probably not. I mean, it's just doing... It's still like, it's crazy to me that they went through all this trouble. But seeing that they went through all this trouble for the main character in the game, maybe that's where they draw the line of like, some of these other characters who aren't like featured as much, we're not going to go through the trouble. But if those characters show up in, in the Miles Morales game or future games, Spider-Man 2, assuming that is, comes out eventually, then it would make sense. Like, that's where you make those changes, right? Like, going forward. Like, but to go through all this trouble for, like, the remaster is, like, I don't know. It just seems like a lot. I don't know.
Well, another weird conspiracy theory that people are clinging to is that PlayStation obviously wanted to charge again for the remaster of the game and not have it free. Obviously, that's an assumption. And maybe they talked to Insomniac and they're like, hey, what can we do to incentivize people to understand why they should pay for this, right? And maybe Insomniac's like, well, we've been thinking about maybe changing the face model for Peter because we want to find something that works better and is more dynamic with Yuri's performance. And PlayStation's like, okay, we'll give you guys the funding for that, greenlight it. You know what I mean? So not like devilish, right, or insidious, but like maybe there was a conversation there. Yeah.
Yeah, like make a real good value case for why we're going to charge more for this. And who knows, it could have been the opposite too. Maybe charging more was a more of an Insomniac decision too. I wouldn't bet on that, but that could have been it too. But yeah, and you notice a lot of their tweets lately have been, to me, like, there's been like so much attention on this remaster. It's like, dude, there's a brand new game that's coming out.
Yeah, exactly.
But like so much attention, and even from their own accounts, from Insomniac and Sony, are like, here's all the cool stuff we're doing in Spider-Man Remastered. It's like, that's cool, but like, what about the new game? Like, I want to hear more about that. To me, that should get the limelight. That should get 90% of your marketing efforts, and that then, because the internet's the internet, and they're gonna like run away with, one puddle's wrong, or like one grunt in Halo looks stupid, and it's like, yeah, but those are just little things, like just stop exploding tiny little things. But I think Sony could do a better job of like guiding some of that conversation with this game, at least.
Well, that's to the point of where's their messaging for the console as we're approaching launch. Like, the only news you're getting now necessarily aren't the best of headlines, right? Like, come on. You have plenty of things that are great to talk about. Why is the one burning story for PlayStation right now? Why did you change the character model of Peter Parker and Spider-Man? Yeah.
Like, stop letting the internet carry that narrative, because it's just this stupid little thing at the end of the day, right? It doesn't matter. It's dumb. But when they just letting the internet go on and on about it, like, no, put something else out there to take over, like some other marketing note to
what's the bad news sandwich, right? You give good news, then you give the bad news, then you give some more good news.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we'll see what happens. Once again, with me, I actually, there have been so many comparison shots now of the two models between the two, and during the time I was like, okay, I like this design of Peter, and in retrospect I kind of don't like it as much now that I see the new one. I'm like, yeah, I actually am not a huge fan of it. And obviously people are the other way of like, I definitely don't like the new one. I love the old one.
I can already do it. I already have ideas. Like, a lot of people love the new design for Miles in the new game, right? Like, yeah, put out a blog post or someone explaining like what they did differently this time around to make it look more authentic. Like, because you're gonna get, this sounds dumb, but like from a diversity standpoint, you're going to get a lot of credit and praise for that. So like, lean into that right now instead of talking about some stupid thing in the remaster, or talk about, a lot of people fell in love with in the Miles Morales demo where he's walking through Harlem or whatever they call it, and how it felt Hispanic and authentic and all that. Like, talk about that. Like, put a blog post about like what you guys did to get all that to feel the way it does.
Capture authentic Puerto Rican culture and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then that will get a lot of attention and then get people's worries off this stupid.
And some people may say that's like, pandering or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's like, as from a marketing perspective, that's the stuff you have to lean into, especially when you have news like this come out too. I don't know. There's easy wins for PlayStation, and they're just not securing them. It's kind of like a news story we didn't cover this week of the new Chromecast isn't going to have Stadia on it. Like, why? Imran Khan of Kind of Funny in recent Game Informer had a really funny tweet where he's like, I think sometimes Google forgets they own Stadia. It's just like, such an easy one. Anyways, let's get into this video game book club. Tell me why Chapter 2. So we're going to do what we did last week, where we're going to go over the major story beats and locations, and then we're going to talk about the choices at the end and, give some predictions as to where we think the story's going. So this one is called Family Secrets, aptly named. It starts off with a storybook opening, kind of obviously paying homage to the fantastical created characters and stuff that the family, Marianne and her two children, put together.
The goblins.
Yeah. I thought that was really neat. And then we get to the nighttime flashback. where at first you're like, okay, why are we seeing them talk at the dinner table and then get put to bed, and Marianne's reading them a bedtime story, and then you realize that after they go to sleep, Allison wakes up in the middle of the night and goes downstairs to get some more ice cream, as a little kid would, right? And as she's standing at the kitchen desk or shelf.
Yo, hold up. She goes to drink the ice cream right out of the carton, and I love that.
Yeah, legendary move right there, Hall of Fame move. Mm-hmm. She hears, commotion outside, and then we find out that this was the moments and the day that the event happened. She runs outside and obviously ends up stabbing Marianne in the back, and you tie it all together, and it starts making you question. I don't know if you felt the same way, Dom. Like, she just read them a bedtime story. Where was that switch flipped, where it went from her being kind to them and reading a bedtime story, and then her standing out there obviously with a shotgun. And as this chapter unfolds, we hear more and more. But how did you feel about the revelation that you were witnessing the events leading up to the event?
I am still a little confused, and maybe as we walk through it, I'll realize better what was going on. But yeah, the timelines to me started to get confusing, and you mentioned it last week after chapter 1, like maybe we're going to get into like how reliable are these flashbacks and their memories exactly, especially as it leaned into like here's how Allison remembered it versus how Tyler remembered it and so on, because I was kind of confused because I thought that Tyler cut his hair and then went out to the shed Allison cut Tyler's hair for him, and then he went out to the shed, and that's where he encountered his mom. But then this is like different because they were getting put to bed, like you said, and then I don't know. I'm a bit confused, to be honest.
So basically, what we don't know, and I think the reason they don't show it is that when Allison wakes up, we don't know that Ollie, as she refers to him as a kid, he's not Tyler yet. He's Ollie, right? That was his like kid name for himself. We don't know if he's still in bed. So my assumption is that he woke up in the middle of the night, went to the shed. Allison was still asleep. When Allison woke up, she didn't bother to check if her brother was still in bed. She just assumed he was. She went downstairs to eat the ice cream. Then she heard them, and at that point, obviously, what happened.
So he didn't go to show. Because his mom wasn't home yet when they cut his hair. Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
I'm clicking now. I'm in.
Because even when they're sitting at the dinner table, you can tell that Ollie's hair is shorter, and he has like little braids tied behind his head too.
Okay.
So yeah, the first area, I guess. There was an opening musical montage that showed the age transition between them as kids and them as adults in the house, which I thought was really cool. Felt very Life is Strange-esque. Really cool, like, indie song in the background as well. But the first location we're at is back at the house with Allison and Tyler, and they're essentially marking what they want to throw, what they want to keep, and what they want to sell. And there was some player choice in that of, there was a couple of things that you had to mark a certain way, but there were certain items that you could be like, the coffee table is like, do we keep this or should we not? Should I sell this? Which I thought was cool. I always love a little bit of agency in these games. Who knows if that pays off? Like, I wonder, at the end in your new house that you assume you guys have, right? Or you have as Tyler alone or whatever, or if you end up moving in, if we see those items because we chose to keep them, I think that would be a pretty cool little hint at, player agency in the game. But I want to go over some beats real quick, and then you can point out whatever ones you want to talk about, Dom. So I wrote down first, deciding what to keep throw, which we just went over. Hinting at the financial struggle. We hear more about this of like they weren't necessarily financially well off, and Marianne had a lot of issues with income and money in general. Tyler mentions that he's finally getting top surgery. This is something we didn't know. We didn't know if Tyler had already gotten his top surgery or not, but he talks about having the and forgive me for forgetting the term, but the sports bra-esque type of thing that a lot of trans men wear to kind of hold down their breasts when they haven't had their top surgery yet. I was glad they put that in there because I never thought about that before. So that was enlightening as far as like what people do for that. So yeah, I appreciated that. Yeah, it's just as people who aren't trans, it's just something you never think about because why would you ever think about it? But then when you find out about it, it's like, man, well, how much does that cost? What's the recovery time? Mm-hmm. If you are somebody who lives in a household who kind of rejects you being trans, who do you get to help you get to and from the hospital? Like, there's a lot of stuff there that's like, it's awful to think about in terms of people being in the worst case scenario for that stuff. I'm trying to read what I wrote here. I said all characters Oh, all characters based on people. We find out that the moose, the bear, and the seagull are based on characters, and there's a neat little puzzle where you have to solve. And obviously, you find out that the seagull is Tessa because she gives you guys food, which is the financial struggle part. You find out that the moose is Eddie, and because he's like protective, and then you find out the bear is Sam because he's like helpful and stuff. So I thought that was pretty neat as well, and that leans into once you know that you're like, well, who are these other characters then? You know, and then you kind of start piecing together that Marianne might have been the princess. But yeah, this initial thing at the house. I'm seeing if there's anything else I wanted to mention. When Sam comes back and you have your second interaction with him, we'll get to that next. But in terms of all this other stuff I mentioned we talked about the top surgery, but the character thing, Dom, or maybe the financial struggle. Do you have anything to say there?
Not really. I mean, it plays a role, but yeah, I was like, okay, I could see it.
Yeah. So the second interaction with Sam, he comes by and he's bearing gifts, right? So he gives Tyler a knife, which is like very much something a male role model or figure does to younger men. It's like, here's your knife. You're a man now. Take care of it or whatever. You know what I mean? Especially in a place like Alaska.
It's funny because like literally not long before this, I went back and rewatched Sony's 2016 E3 press conference. And like in the God of War trailer, Kratos gives Atreus a knife and says, "It was your mother's. You will hunt with this now," or whatever. He's corniness. So, but it was like the same kind of thing.
Yeah, this is a very typical thing. It was a nice gesture from Sam, and then he gifts Allison, or technically both of them, a famous fish dish that Marianne knew how to cook that he learned how to cook from her. So it was like a fish on a platter with vegetables. It looked pretty good. And Allison's like, well, hey, we can't really warm this because we don't have a stove, working one anyways, or a working oven. And that leads them to go to the barn to fix the outlet to make sure everything works. This puzzle, Dom, it wasn't difficult by any means, but I don't know if you ever do this. I read the first part of like instructions in video games anyways. And then I didn't read the second part where it talked about the colors. Because, the first part talks about it needs to be 120 amps. The garage needs to be 15, right? I read that. So I was like, okay, I'll do the math. That means everything else, I need to do like 4 of them 15 and 2 of them 30 to equal 120. I didn't read the second part that's like, oh, they're all perfectly color-coded. I was like, oh, this is way simpler than I made it out to be.
I did the same thing. I was like trying to do this math. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can make it add up, but then how do I know which one? I just have to keep, guess and check or whatever. And then like, this is dumb. Why am I? And then yeah, like read the second note again. Like, oh, the color. Oh, okay, yeah, it's just like yellow, red.
Exactly. Yeah, I made it way more difficult than it needed to be. I'm trying to think of what else we find out in that garage besides turning on the power. I guess there's a little conflict between Sam and Tyler over the keys, right? They get the keys from him, and then that ends up Tyler breaking the barn door, which leads into something that happens later of it being easily accessible by somebody. Who could that be? Who knows? I guess here, it makes me more endearing towards Sam once again because he was willing to come by and give them gifts. Like, he didn't need to. And he seems a lot more thoughtful, despite being like the town drunk, it seems. So I thought that was nice. And you can tell that he's cautious around Tyler because though he's not familiar with what being trans is, and obviously he doesn't live in a necessarily modern society or surrounds himself with that type of thought process, he's making an effort. You know what I mean? So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Much more than some other characters we'll get to in terms of being more understanding. This is another thing we find out in there is Sam has guilt tied to the gun. We find out that he gave Marianne the shotgun, and he kind of has a hard time looking at the mantle where it was placed, and you can tell he feels a lot of resentment towards gifting that to her, and that could be a key part of the story moving forward. Of Sam feels that if he never gave her the gun, it wouldn't have led to the events that happened. So, next up, okay. So this is where we exit the barn, Dom, and we see the conversation between Eddie and Marianne. Right? You find out that Eddie's mother was friends with Marianne, and so remember, I'm taking these notes as the story is unfolding. So based on the information we get, I thought that Eddie had to pull his mom off of life support. The way he was talking to Marianne of like, I'm sorry I had to do it, right? And I thought he was talking about like, my mom was dying, she was your friend, but sorry, we had to do what we had to do, right? That's the vibe I got. But then also, we get the, I don't know if it's confirmation, but did you get the sense that Marianne and his mom were good friends?
Wait, whose mom?
Eddie's mom.
Did they? Eddie's mom. Wait a minute.
Yeah, they mentioned Eddie's mom like several times after you leave the barn.
Okay. I don't even remember her being mentioned.
Yeah. And like I said,
So
I'm
I
writing
guess
these
not.
in the moment, so she ends up becoming less of an importance later. But they did mention her, and I was like, why are they mentioning her so much? Why does it even matter? But then we get to the choice of deciding between which Marianne Eddie conversation you go with, right? So it's either Allison's, which Marianne was sad and Eddie was very much the accuser, or Tyler's, which Marianne was mad and she was much more defensive. I went with Allison's memory just because to me it felt that was a much more reasonable conversation based on what we've learned about Marianne and the circumstances she was in. Which one did you choose?
I thought that I can't remember which one was which, but like where Marianne is more angry.
That's
She says
Tyler's.
like, yeah, where she like is pissed off and basically says like, you betrayed me or something to that effect.
So we've gone. This is the second time we've gone opposite of each other because the last one we also went the other way, which is awesome about these games. So this is where we also find out that this conversation happened on the same day as the event. So now we're trying to piece together. Okay, this conversation happened. Then there was the stuff with her tucking the kids into bed and cutting the hair, and then there was the actual event that happened. This leads to them wanting to drive to the police station to talk to Eddie, right, and get more information about what's this conversation, what exactly happened. But they make a pit stop in the forest at this like traveled spot because Allison is on the phone with Tina, who is, I assume, their real estate agent or whoever they're working with. And she tells Allison that she found a buyer and the buyer can buy the house for cash. And you choose at this point of wanting to hear about the buyer or deciding you want to hold off. It's not really important right now. I went with that. I'm waiting to sell. We have much bigger fish to fry right now. Did you do the same?
No,
You
dude.
went opposite.
I was like, you hear horror stories about like people who can't sell their house and like they're way up in the nowhere. Like, not often you're gonna get a buyer, and like, and Allison this whole time has been more on like the side of let's move on already. Like, I don't want to keep digging into all this. Like, let's move on. So I did get a little bit stuck. That's my problem with all these types of games is like, am I supposed to be making these choices from my own perspective or from Allison's perspective? It's hard. But yeah, I went with like, let's sell this motherfucker.
Yeah, well, from my perspective too, I thought I was making Allison's decision because at that point they were so, with that new conversation, focused on getting answers that in that moment, if somebody is currently dealing with questions on their mind and they're driving somewhere to get answers, they'd much rather hang up on the phone and have that conversation later, right? Humans are very much like that of like, okay, we'll deal with this later. I don't want to deal with this now. Let me try to figure this out. But yeah, so I waited to sell. Next up, we had the conflict over Eddie, right? Where they talk about Tyler and her talk about him and what exactly he was doing there at the house that day with having that conversation. And then there was a really neat moment where they fixed the graffiti on the tree where it says OA for Ollie and Allison, and they changed it to be a TA for obviously Tyler and Allison. So I thought that was really cool. Wasn't like a super important moment, but I thought it was very symbolic, obviously, of who Tyler is now. Next up, they go to the police station where there's a confrontation there, and we'll get to the confrontation itself. But first, props to Officer Denise Wilson, A++. She was the lady at the front desk, the black woman. I just thought she had a really good personality as like a supporting character that we're probably going to talk to once and never talk to again. That she was really cool. She was very welcoming and open to Tyler too. Didn't make it an issue by any means, which is one of the few people in this story that have not had an issue or brought it up or whatever. So props to her as a character. I just thought it was really well done. Next up, we find out that we have to sneak into the archives because Eddie's currently busy with an investigation and he doesn't want to look at the case files for Marianne, right? So at this point, they decide, okay, we need to sneak into the archives. They realize, okay, Allison, you're not as much of a troublemaker. Tyler created a distraction. This is funny. Were you more trial and error like me where you had to try a couple of distractions before you found one that worked?
Yeah, I tried one that was unsuccessful, and then the second thing I tried worked.
Okay, so I tried, because the one that works is knocking the papers down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I tried the missing persons one,
Me
which
too.
you end up finding out that the girl you say you saw was been dead for like a year and a half. And then
That
I
was
tried
too funny.
and then I tried
Like,
the window one.
no, I didn't even get to the window. What do you do?
The window one is you yell as if somebody's climbing over the fence and trying to get into the police
Oh
station.
God.
And when you say that, the officer's like, "Oh, it's probably Hayden." I think the kid's name was like, "Yeah, he climbs over the fence like at least a couple of times a week trying to get into the police office." He's like a 6-year-old kid or something, 7-year-old kid. So I was like, "Oh yeah, whatever." I thought that was funny. When you go into the office, because before you go into the archives, you sneak upstairs, you go into Eddie's office. One thing I thought was neat is that you find out Eddie paid for Tyler's stay at Fireweed. Like, he paid for the entire thing. Which, based on Tyler's relationship with Eddie, you're like, oh, that's surprising. And we'll get to Eddie's guilt later, but yeah, we assumed that it was like a state mandated thing, right? Or like a court mandated thing of like they sent him there or whatever. But
yeah, it was, because like in the first episode, Eddie talked about it. Like, he tried to say like that was the best deal I could get for you. It was better than like jail or whatever else.
Yeah,
other options.
I guess in that sense I meant like funded, right? That they paid for it. It was the government paying for that. And in reality, it was actually Eddie who paid for all of that and made sure he was able to stay there, which was a pretty shocking revelation, I think, to Tyler, realizing that Eddie was helping him even though he didn't know it.
It's like so many things get complicated for Tyler in this. Like he thinks he knows what his mom was like, and then there's like doubts of that based on stuff he finds. And then same thing. He thinks he doesn't like Eddie for this reason, and then he finds this out that he paid for him, and then he's like, huh. Like, it just kind of complicates everything.
Well, and in the same sense, you hear his opinions on Tessa, and then you find out like a lot of those are substantiated. Like, he's actually kind of right on that.
Yeah.
So he's not a super flawed character in terms of everything he thinks is wrong, but it is funny the way it works out. One thing I noticed, so at this point you go to the archive and you start reading. I like the system in it, or you having to put together tags and seeing separate reports, right, and finding those reports. One little detail I saw is that they didn't recover the scissors, which I thought was interesting. They didn't recover the scissors at the thing, and I could go back and rewatch it, but in my memory, she stabs her, but I don't think the scissors stay in the mom. So I don't. And if the scissors fell in the water with her, you would assume that if they were able to find the shotgun that floated with her, they could have found the scissors possibly. I don't know. I thought it was a weird detail. Could be something, could be nothing.
I remember because you read like the autopsy report, and it mentions witness or like suspect says that they stabbed the victim with scissors, and that is confirmed. I don't know.
Yeah, they confirmed, but then they say they didn't find the scissors. So it's like one of those things where either A, she was stabbed with something and it could be explained as scissors, right? So it's a similar wound. Or what if Allison didn't stab her with scissors, but she did get stabbed with scissors? You know what I mean?
Right.
Which we'll get to later. I put, did they really kill her, or did she commit suicide, right? At this point, like I said, I take notes as I'm playing, so I didn't know. Alcohol in her system is something that they find out in the autopsy, which can play a role in all this, obviously. And then we get into the whole part of Eddie reporting her to child services, and you wonder why this was. And she was accused of theft and child neglect by Tessa. She came to Eddie and told him about this, and whether Eddie wanted to or not, he makes it explicitly clear, like based on procedures, he had to, go through with this just because of the way his job works. One thing I thought was weird, Dom, is that one of them is in the hospital. It says Ronan. Ronan is in the hospital, and Tessa is described as their legal guardian, getting them out of the hospital. Did you catch that?
No.
And I don't know if Tessa was marked as their legal guardian after the events and the kids were in a hospital because of trauma, right? But in the thing, it says that a Ronan was in the hospital. It doesn't clarify if it's the kids or if it was Marianne earlier. But it says that Tessa pulled them out of the hospital and she was their legal guardian. I thought that was weird.
Okay.
And it could just be a legal thing of like maybe because she was the closest family friend when, the mom died or whatever. Who knows? Or it could have been a thing with Marianne. I don't know. I just thought that was weird. Eddie finds you in the archives at this point, right? So you confront him, or you have the confrontation, then you go back to his office. And at this point, you make a major decision. and you can either choose to confront him by basically yelling at him with Tyler, or you can understand his perspective and say like, maybe we can become family, but it's definitely going to take some time. I chose the understanding one. What did you go with?
I went with it's not gonna happen.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Once again, opposite. I couldn't remember. Did you accept the key, the ring?
Nope.
No. So you are in line with like, you didn't accept the ring as a gift, and then you obviously weren't super into forming a bond, and I went the other way where I accepted the ring and I'm forming a bond.
I just don't like him. I think to me, I didn't feel like it's earned yet. Like I know, like he was the one that had taken care of Allison in the meantime, of course. But like, I don't know, he still feels like a stranger to me. Which is how Tyler would feel too, because he's like, he has reasons to not like him, but ultimately it's like,
Yeah.
it just feels like a stranger. But if you're Allison, then like, this has been like basically your dad for a long time now, right? So it's like, but to me, like that isn't like explained enough, and that like that the relationship between Allison and Eddie to me hasn't been like, it's been like briefly mentioned, but like not earned yet to me.
Yeah, for me, I guess Tyler in that moment, to me, even if he wasn't fully into it, part of him might have felt that like, okay, going along with this might result in more answers because I'm willing to work with him. You know what I mean?
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe not a trusting necessarily, but I can get more answers with sugar than salt, right?
Yeah.
But like I said, this is cool because this is the point of these story type games, is that me and you interpret things differently and we make different decisions based on what we assume these characters are thinking, and it leads to different results, which is really cool. What we find out is the kids meant everything to Marianne, and this is kind of a revelation too, because at this point we're still wondering if like, did she care for the kids? Did she hate him? Then we find out the book about learning about trans issues and having a trans child. And to me at this point, when we start hearing from Eddie and seeing all this stuff, like, I do think at the end of the day, Marianne really cared for these kids. Like, they were the most important thing in her life. And obviously she had issues and she's human, but yeah, I think we can't, in my opinion, we can't question the fact that she loved her kids at the end of the day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
We find out Eddie feels guilt, like a lot of guilt, and I think that's obviously why he funded Tyler's stay at Fireweed and, made sure to protect Allison, is because even though he wasn't, I wouldn't say he's necessarily responsible, he was kind of partially doing his job, but I do think he shares some responsibility in that, and you can tell that even though he's kind of a dick, at the end of the day, he has empathy and he feels bad, which is, saying something. At this point, we go to Tom and Tessa's store to confront Tessa, right? We want to know, Tyler and Allison want to know why she reported their mom, right? And they're feeling very angry about this. We go and talk to Tom, who you end up realizing that he hates conflict. He just does not like conflict, which is hilarious since he's running for office. And he just avoided the whole situation when you go into his office, which is really funny. The dad gets mentioned again. Who's the dad? Tyler brings that up to Tom, and Allison's like, why did he bring that up? Why does it matter? And he's like, I just wanted to know. So this leads to Tessa being away from the store, and we're going to have to go find her later. But before we do, and we close the store, Tyler goes to help Michael close up the store. And this is where we find out some revelations are me and you are dead wrong, Dom.
Yeah, I was
absolutely
laughing so hard
dead wrong.
How dumb I felt. Like,
so initially, if you guys missed the first time we talked about this in Chapter 1, we assumed, both of us, that Michael was Allison's boyfriend without the title. They were kind of keeping a hush-hush, especially from Tyler. And that eventually one of the conflicts between Tyler and Allison is that she would reveal that Michael's her boyfriend. Turns out, Michael's gay. And we find that out as they're closing the store. Michael flirts with Tyler. And we haven't had confirmation if Tyler's gay or straight, right?
Well, we get it here.
Yes. But I'm saying before this point, yeah. So Michael flirts with him a bunch, giving him compliments as you're figuring out how much of the inventory is left. And then I think Michael, in this whole thing of him flirting, obviously you decide if you want to acknowledge his flirtations or kind of push him away. I chose to accept them. For me, I felt like Tyler was interested in Michael to some extent. Were you the same?
Yeah, I did the same this time.
Their end conversation before you leave this section is really interesting because Michael has, even though he's more of a secondary character, he had some of the most important lines, I think, in this chapter, where he first talks about how chosen family can mean the difference in your life, right? So not the people that you're born being related to, but the chosen family you find that can accept you for who you are, right? Which is a really powerful sentiment in the LGBTQ plus community, because a lot of times people have to find chosen family because people are so backwards minded, you know what I mean, and awful. And then he talks about how Tessa, uh, I forgot the exact quote, but he basically says, just because you are religious doesn't give you the right to weaponize it against other people, right? Which is a profound statement that I think a lot of people believe in, even if you are religious or not religious. The worst thing you can do is weaponize that to be hateful. And he brings that up, and I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Michael's a really key character in all of this, even though he might not be directly involved in the mystery of it all. I think at the end of the day, he might be one of our favorite characters just based on what he brings to the table as a friend.
Yeah, I appreciate
Next
it.
up, next up, Cemetery Separation Promise Memory. I'm trying to think of what I meant when I wrote this. Cemetery Separation Promise Memory. Oh, so when we're at the cemetery, right, we go to try to find Tessa, you come up across that totem, right? That native totem that's in the cemetery, and you have two memories there. And they're solely based on, this is after Marianne has passed, and they each make a promise to each other in their memories. In Allison's memory, Tyler promises to return to her, right? And in Tyler's memory, he promises that he'll visit Allison. I went with Tyler's memory because, to me, based on the characters, I felt like Allison was more likely to promise to Tyler that Tyler's was more willing to promise to Allison that he'd come visit her, especially since he seemed like the more mature person in that whole situation. Whereas Allison, I don't know if she would say like opposite of that. You don't understand what I'm saying. I went with Tyler's memory.
I did the same too. I don't know. It brought me back to the night of the event, right, where Tyler made the choice to say, here's what we're going to tell them. And I'm going to take responsibility for this. Or you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I felt like he would be the one to say, like, I'll come back and visit you. I don't know. It was just a vibe I had.
Next up, we find out from Tessa, who we still aren't sure is a reliable narrator or not, that Marianne was like a homewrecker. And obviously,
Yeah.
Tessa's very religious, so you don't know from what perspective this is coming from, but she basically says, if she would have just settled down with a man, nothing would have happened, yada, 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 right? And she's kind of blaming her. You find out that she's the reason that Sam and his wife aren't together anymore. Once again, from Tessa's perspective, who's to say that since we know Sam,
Sure.
he might have come on a little too strong and it wasn't even Marianne's fault, right? So, some stuff there. Okay, Tessa's relationship choice. What did you choose here for Tyler? You could either choose, I don't want to lose anyone else and, befriend her, or you're just like, nope, I'm out of here. I said, nope, I'm out of here.
Yeah. This was tough. I went for a bridge on this one. I'm not really consistent. I was like, I told Eddie F off, but for Tessa, for some reason, I was like, oh, I'm exhausted from telling people to F off.
Yeah.
Not so much that I believe in Tessa that much. But yeah, I gave her another chance. I was like, I don't want to lose any more people. And she kind of, I don't know what she said to you in your scenario, but she kind of got to a point, I don't even want to call it acceptance of Tyler because it felt even like short of that. But she basically said like, well, now that I don't understand this, but I can see that you're such a young, confident, good man in front of me right now. So I guess that's the way it is. And I get that. Something along those lines. It was a step for her, right?
My breaking point with her, and this is something we didn't mention with the Michael conversation, is Michael mentions that, oh yeah, every time I put up flyers for these gay events,
Oh yeah,
they somehow get covered up, And to me, I'm like, oh, she's just a shitty person. So I was just like, yeah, I'm not even gonna try to, build a bridge between us.
mm-hmm.
And it's just, I think part of that too comes to personal experience of dealing with religious zealots and bigots like that, of like, I'm kind of just tired in my real life of those type of people. You know what I mean? So I'm like, for Tyler's sake, I'm gonna no thank you.
Dude, I mean, I have that argument with myself all the time, right? Because how do you like you block that person off, like, well, they're just gonna dig in farther, right? But if like your best chance at educating someone is from people close to them, trying to like slowly get them to understand and give them chances. Not that they deserve any of that, right?
Yeah.
But for that moment, for whatever reason, I felt soft. I went with that.
Well, and there's the push and pull there of at what point do you exchange teaching an adult about empathy that should have already known that
You give up eventually.
in exchange for your happiness? You know what I mean? Because you're going to get frustrated trying to teach somebody.
And you're going to exhaust yourself doing it. Yep.
Exactly. We return home and we find out the barn's on fire, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So basically, the barn's on fire. Allison runs in to get something. I don't even know. What does she run to get? Water bucket or something? I don't even know. Yeah. She runs to go get something. Tyler approaches the barn door. A dude pops out of it. And immediately you make the connection of, oh, this is the mysterious, creepy stranger in the storybook. This is who they saw at some point. So I write down real quickly, is the stranger the dad, Sam, or someone else we already know? Because at that point I'm like, it could be Sam, it could be the dad we don't know about, it could be Eddie, somebody, right? Because they're in full, like, they actually look like the lead character in Watchmen, the new Watchmen series, her costume. I wrote down, ends with Doc cutscene, right? Because obviously at the end of all of this, you explore the barn, you end up finding this box, and in the box, it's Marianne talking to whoever the dad is, and then you assume, okay, this person is trying to get this information. They're the dad. The stranger is the dad, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of draw that. We still don't know who the dad is, but now we know it's the dad. And once again, dad could still be Sam. We don't know. Eddie, I don't think so, because he's like kind of young. He's like in his mid-30s, so I doubt he's the dad. She would have slept with him when he was like 15 or something, which is quite problematic. Here's the thing, at the end, during this Doc cutscene, when Marianne's talking to this man, and I don't know if I'm just reading into this too much, Dom, but I got the impression that this man might have raped her.
Okay.
Because in the discussion, he says, like, oh, how are they going to believe you if you go to court? They're not going to give you custody. And then she says, you don't deserve these kids. I want you out of here. And to me, it started reading a lot like sexual assault. Like, he took something from her. And based on my own experiences with very religious people, a lot of times religious people tend to victim blame. And Tessa victim blaming Marianne of, oh, she's a floozy, she sleeps with all these men, she's a homewrecker. I think maybe Marianne could have gotten sexually assaulted. And maybe she confessed in Tessa that this happened, and Tessa's response is, why are you...
Victim blame,
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of got that vibe, and like I said, I may be reading too much into it. I might not be that crazy, but it did definitely give me the vibe of, like, maybe Marianne was raped, and these kids are the product of a sexual assault.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because, I mean, that would make... That whole scene would make a lot of sense there, because otherwise it's like, well, what would the father have done that he's, like, not even existing, basically, and he's just this shadowy figure, and no one can know about him. But that makes a lot of sense. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. And the fact that she was so against them even knowing who he was, and you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It just, it feels like that way. It might go that direction. And then we find out, because obviously Allison notices this conversation, the I'm going to kill you line that she thought she heard the mom tell Tyler was actually Marianne telling the guy, right? And at this point, this is like the final thing that's not the post-credit scene. And this, to me, is like, what really happened then? Because if that line is incorrect, what did happen? You know?
I'm basically, like, doubting that whole event now, and the timeline of it, and, like, who said what and who did what. Now, I'm starting to question, like, was like...
Because if she can be psychologically affected to like that, where she even doesn't understand who's being talked to in that moment... And I do think they seeded that with the memory stuff. It's a core mechanic of the game of we're deciding, do I believe Tyler's memory or Allison's memory? Right. And it might come to a point that the one memory, if you notice, that they don't kind of disagree on is that final memory. And I think that's going to be the one where they're both wrong. You know what I mean? And the trauma of it all made them change what happened.
I mean, so Tyler cut his hair, and then he shows up to... Actually, it's making a lot of sense. So, like, Tyler had just cut his hair and opens the barn door, and his mom had just went through whatever with the father, and then turns around and, like, sees the father in Tyler now with the short hair, especially, right?
Exactly.
And is in whatever kind of mental state she was in, and that's why, ooh.
And that's why she's anti-Tyler being a boy, is not because she's transphobic. It's because she has a scar of men in her life from being sexually assaulted, and Tyler with short hair reminds her of that man.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shit.
And a total misunderstanding, right? This kid growing up thinking his mom's transphobic and hates him for who he was, and in reality, it's because he looked like their dad or reminded her of the dad.
No, I mean, I don't think that she's totally absent of transphobia, but the primary crazy driver in it. I think you're right.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. The post-credit scene was a little odd to me because the stinger, it's them talking and saying, okay, we're gonna do it. We have one more thing to sneak into, and it looked like it was showing the attic. So are we supposed to assume they're gonna go into the attic? Like, I didn't get the point of the stinger, really, if I'm being honest.
Oh, okay. I exited because I assumed it was the next chapter.
No, so after you do look at the choices, which I'll get into the percentages after this, there's a post-credit sequence where it shows like a stained glass window, and it's Tyler and Allison talking about, we got one more thing to sneak into, sneaky goblins, yada yada, their little cutesy sibling talk.
So just a little teaser, I guess.
Yeah, and to me, I read like, okay, so are we sneaking into the attic of the house? Like, is there, because the way it looked, it's like maybe this was Marianne's getaway, or was it Marianne's room? Because we haven't been inside her room, right? Or have we?
Oh, her room, yeah.
Oh yeah, because we unlocked the puzzle in the first chapter. Yeah. So I don't know. I was confused about it, and you didn't see it yet, so I can't ask you about it either. Thank God it wasn't something more crazy, and you're like, wait, what? It was just a window shot. So real quick, 56% of people chose Tyler's side in the first memory conversation. So I was in the minority on that because I chose Allison's. You were in the majority. 64% of people passed on the house, so I was in the majority. You were in the minority. 82% of people forgave Eddie. I was in the majority. You were in the minority. 77% of people took Mike's compliment. We were both in the majority there. Who wouldn't take his compliment? Like, even if Tyler isn't interested in him, it's like, take a compliment. He wasn't being a creep about it.
And even when you when you lean into it, it's not like, it never felt like, oh, they're about to start making out right here and it's going to be all corny. Yeah. It never felt like that was where it was. It was just like a nice conversation.
It wasn't cringy or awkward or anything.
Yeah.
83% of people forgave Tessa. That to me is surprising. I thought it would have been closer to a 50-50 split, but I was vastly in the minority on that one. So we're going to be hopping into Chapter 3 in the coming week and talking about it next week. We might have a special guest for that as well. So far, I want to say I'm enjoying it. It's lived up to my expectations for it. It's exactly what I wanted. Having a blast.
Me too. Yeah. I'm really enjoying it. It's doing so much right. I haven't had a good mystery story in my life in a while, and I'm into it. I'm excited to see how this plays out and learning some things along the way. Yeah, I'm enjoying this a lot.
Those listening, it's available on Game Pass, so you don't have to spend any more money than you already are on Game Pass if you already have it. So definitely check it out.
And Game Pass for PC, by the way.
Yep, exactly. Pretty good conversation there. We'll get into what we've been playing next week if we have time, or the following week. We kind of want to focus on the Tell Me Why Video Game Book Club just because it's a fun time, and we haven't really done anything like this before. If you guys have enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on iTunes. Listen to us on Spotify. It definitely helps. On YouTube, you can search Controlled Interests. We'll pop right up. Like the video podcasts. If you like them, leave us a comment. I read all of them, except for the weird adult spammy ones, as I talked about before. On Twitter, you can follow us at CTRLINT. That's Controlled Interests abbreviated. You can follow me at Jerrad_. You can follow Dom at Dom's Oreos. We'll be back next week with hopefully the news that PlayStation 5s are going out to people. Hopefully. We'll see. Thank you guys for listening. Catch you next week. Bye.